tell you that the #1 problem in Hollywood was and is and always will be affiliates.
Before we get into what Jeffrey Epstein's inner circle was allegedly consuming, before we get into the code word emails the chef from a restaurant literally called the cannibal, the 330 gallons of sulphuric acid ordered the day after his indictment, you need to understand that one man has been screaming about this network for over 30 years.
Yeah, I was surrounded by them. They were everywhere like vultures.
And every single time he opened his mouth, they called him unstable. They called him a has-been. They called him a liar.
It's an 8-armed octopus. And if you take just out, that arm will grow back. You have to take that.
8 arms, 1 head, and what that head was allegedly doing on a private island in the Caribbean, documented in federal emails, confirmed by DOJ releases, described in handwritten journal entries from victims, is something that should make every person watching this stop and ask one question. Why did it take this long for anyone to listen? Let's go back to the beginning, not 2020, not 2015, all the way back to the 1980s. Corey Feldman was a child star at the absolute peak of Hollywood's golden era. The Goonies, Stand By Me, The Lost Boys, Gremlins. If you grew up in that decade, his face was everywhere. He was the kid who represented something pure, childhood on screen, innocence bottled up and sold to millions of families who had absolutely no idea what was happening to him the moment those cameras stopped rolling.
There was a circle of older men, and they all had either their own power or connections to great power that surrounded themselves around this group of kids.
Connections to great power. Let that phrase sit for a second, because Feldman isn't describing a few isolated predators. He's describing a system, an organized, protected, self-sustaining network where access to children was treated like a commodity, and the people providing that access were rewarded with career advancement, industry protection, and silence from every institution that should have stopped it. For years, Feldman tried to get anyone, in the media to take this seriously. He went on talk shows, he gave interviews, he begged journalists to follow the thread, and every single time, the machine closed around him.
Thousands of people in Hollywood who have this same information. Why me? Why is it if I don't release the names in the next 2 months, 6 months, or a year, I'm the bad guy? I'm the victim here. I'm the one who's been abused. I'm the one who's trying to come forward and do something about it.
Think about what that actually means. Thousands of people, not dozens, thousands. People who witnessed the same things, heard the same stories, were present in the same rooms, and every single one of them stayed quiet. That's not coincidence. That's not fear of social awkwardness. That's a controlled system of silence built by people with enough power to end careers, end reputations, and according to multiple sources, end lives. Feldman eventually did something that almost nobody in Hollywood has ever done. He spent $1.3 million of his own money he didn't have to spare, to make a documentary called My Truth, The Rape of Two Coreys. In that film, he named names: Marty Weiss, John Grissom, Alfie Hoffman, Dominic Braggia, Charlie Sheen. But here's what Feldman himself has said repeatedly since that documentary dropped. Those names were just one arm. Jim Caviezel, the actor who gave up his entire mainstream career to spotlight child trafficking, has been describing the same architecture Feldman identified, but from a different angle, a wider angle.
It's an 8-armed octopus. And if you take just out, that arm will grow back. You have to take
that 8 arms. What Feldman was exposing was the Hollywood arm, the one that preyed on child actors, that used the casting process as a hunting mechanism, that protected its members through industry loyalty and financial leverage. But Caviezel's point is that this arm doesn't operate alone. It connects to a political arm, a financial arm, a media arm, and according to documents now in federal hands, an island arm, Little St. James, Jeffrey Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the place that, according to satellite imagery, DOJ released photographs and multiple survivor testimonies, was engineered from the ground up to make escape impossible. Passports confiscated, flight crews paid off, staff at the airport bribed to look the other way. This wasn't a party destination. This was a controlled environment, and what was happening inside that environment goes significantly deeper than what most people are willing to discuss. When the Epstein documents were unsealed, the world expected a handful of famous names attached to its extracting operation. What they got was something that forced even the most skeptical observers to reconsider what they thought they understood about how power actually works in this country. Here's where it gets disturbing in a very specific, documented way. Analysts who reviewed hundreds of thousands of emails released by the Department of Justice discovered something that went far beyond the trafficking allegations. Epstein and his associates were communicating using a system of food-based code words, and the context in which those words were being used makes no rational sense if you take them literally. Beef jerky, white tuna, pizza, grape soda. On the surface, those are grocery items. In the context of these emails, Yar paired with the other details surrounding them, the quantities being discussed, the way they're being stored, refrigerated, transported, they read as something else entirely. That's not a dinner invitation.
There were emails from people, redacted names again, saying, hey, I have 68 pounds of jerky in my freezer. I'm not sure what to do with it. There were emails of, I need more jerky. I'm going to send it to the lab.
68 pounds sent to a lab. The names attached to those emails, redacted, every single one. And then there's the chef, Francis Darby, the man whose name appears in emails with Epstein discussing recipes, quantities, preparation methods, and storage instructions for items being prepared on Little St. James Island.
The chef that was making the jerky, that was sending recipes, that was on the island, was Francis Darby. Who's that? Francis Darby owns the restaurant Cannibal.
There is a 2012 email from Jeffrey Epstein to Chef Francis Darby, documented, inquiring about the handling of frozen white tuna and the preparation of specific recipes to be carried out on the island. Darby at that time owned and operated a meat-focused restaurant in New York and Los Angeles called, without any irony, the Cannibal. Now, that restaurant served conventional food. It was a real business, and nobody is claiming it literally served what the name implies. But when the owner of an establishment called the Cannibal is exchanging coded food preparation emails with Jeffrey Epstein about island recipes, storing items by the pound, and sending batches to labs, the name stops feeling like clever branding. And here's the email that investigators keep coming back to. Subject line, jerky recipe, dated December 21st, 2012.
Hi, Steve Hansen, no relation.
Thank
On
God.
Jeffrey's Island is requesting the latest beef jerky recipe as He has asked her to try and make some. He says the last batch that you made tasted different.
The response references the old way Francis was doing it and confirms that someone on Little St. James Island was going to attempt the preparation themselves. They're not talking about actual beef jerky. Everyone who has reviewed these emails at length, investigators, journalists, commentators, has reached the same conclusion. The language, the quantities, the logistics, the lab references, none of it maps onto snack food production. So the question becomes, what were they actually preparing and who was consuming it? To understand that question, you have to understand something about the culture at the very top of the Hollywood and billionaire elite ecosystem, something that Corey Feldman has been gesturing at for years, without always having the language to articulate it precisely. There is an obsession, documented, on record, discussed openly on mainstream television, with youth, with the biological properties of youth, with finding ways to absorb, transfer, or retain the vitality associated with being young. And that obsession exists on a spectrum, on the publicly visible end of that spectrum, things that sound strange but are legal.
This is made from growth hormones of human...
Look, the wrinkles has just disappeared.
On daytime television, a guest applying a skincare product derived from human foreskin tissue, and the product being endorsed and promoted to millions of viewers as an anti-aging breakthrough.
I'm sorry, Steve.
You'd have sat up here and squirted somebody's private parts in my damn ears.
The audience laughed. The host was horrified in a comedic way, and the product kept selling. That's the public-facing version of something that gets significantly darker the further up the wealth and power ladder you climb. The mainstream medical community, not fringe researchers, mainstream institutions, has been openly exploring compounds derived from young blood, plasma transfusion trials, stem cell anti-aging protocols, clinical studies on whether biological material from younger donors can meaningfully reverse aging markers in older recipients. That science is real. It's being funded. It's being studied. What witnesses and investigators describe in the context of Epstein's Island network is the version of that science that operates without ethics boards, without consent protocols, without any institutional oversight whatsoever.
She believed consumption was transformation, that youth could be taken in, that vitality could be absorbed. She talked about ancient rites, about elites throughout history who understood what the masses didn't.
Ancient rites, elites throughout history. The claim isn't that this mindset is new. The claim, and supported by historical record going back centuries, is that certain circles of extreme wealth have always believed they were entitled to access things that ordinary people couldn't have. And that belief, when it exists in an environment with zero accountability, no law enforcement, and an island specifically designed to prevent escape, produces outcomes that are genuinely difficult to process. But it goes further than treatments and compounds, much further. Among the thousands of documents released by the DOJ, there are journal entries, handwritten entries from a victim, describing experiences on Epstein's properties with a level of specific, personal detail that investigators have described as highly credible, specifically because of how precisely they align with known facts about Epstein's inner circle.
Close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes. Don't speak, she doesn't talk. I can't stop shaking and it's been a week. A decision was made, but I can't tell Jeffrey.
The entry goes on to describe a medical procedure, a doctor, a clinical environment, pain, and then a tiny head, a tiny arm, a tiny foot, and then silence.
Chillingly, there is even a picture of a sonogram on a page with the words, "She is gone and she won't be coming back."
Investigators have described what these journals point toward as a deliberate operation, victims being used as surrogates, pregnancies being managed on the island, the resulting infants never accounted for in any official record. What happened to those infants has not been officially confirmed, but given everything else documented in these files, the sulphuric acid, the buried bodies being investigated at Zorro Ranch, the code word emails referencing quantities and labs, the picture that emerges is one that should disturb every person watching this video. 7,000 acres in New Mexico, currently being excavated, multiple victims coming forward describing being drugged, waking up in what appeared to be medical settings with no memory of how they got there, and reporting signs consistent with organ harvesting.
He ordered 330 gallons of sulfuric acid.
What?
Yes. He ordered 6 55-gallon drums of sulfuric acid to be delivered to the island.
The day after his indictment in 2018, Jeffrey Epstein ordered 330 gallons of sulfuric acid to be delivered to the island, 6 55-gallon drums. The first instinct of investigators and commentators who reviewed that order was the same. You don't order 330 gallons of industrial acid to maintain a desalination plant. And here's where Corey Feldman's warning becomes the through line that connects every single piece of this. Because Feldman wasn't just exposing what happened to him. He was warning about a system that operates through silence, enforced silence, purchased silence, and in some documented cases, permanent silence. That's the architecture. You don't just attend, you participate. And once you've participated, your continued silence is guaranteed, not by loyalty, but by mutual implication. Everyone in the room carries the same weight. Everyone in the room has the same reason to protect the secret. This is what Jim Caviezel experienced firsthand when Sound of Freedom, a film about child rescue operations, not about any specific celebrity, was essentially blacklisted before release.
Everyone was told, from Rupert Murdoch, from Fox, to every studio, look, if you touch this thing, you will be out, you will be done. You'll be finished in 3 years.
Every major studio, every major network, not asked, told, to stay away from a film about saving children. Think about what that requires. Think about how many people at how many levels of decision making.